Hey everyone, I'm Matt Lockyer. I'm from Proximity.dev, Proximity Labs, otherwise known as, and I'm going to be taking you through a brief high-level tour on BOS Gateways, and we can talk a little bit deeper about the BOS virtual machine and how it all comes together in your browser and how you basically see BOS components. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm on a call with all these awesome people. And we're going to do my demo first, and then we're going to switch to a Q&A later. So I basically pinned some tabs here, and the first one that I'd like to start with, I'll just zoom in a bit, is the near documentation for launching a BOS gateway. So let's just explain a little bit about BOS at a high level. What is it? There's basically these code components that are deployed on chain. We'll see examples of components throughout this tutorial. I'm sure you've probably seen examples of a BOS component before. And then there's the gateway. So how does a tiny snippet of BOS code that basically says stuff like talk to your near wallet, talk to your Ethers.js, and talk to your Ethereum wallet, how does that tiny bit of code spring to life and get wrapped up with a bunch of other code that's normally found in a lot of Web3 projects? Well, that's a great question. And how do these BOS components get rendered and put inside your browser or embedded inside a mobile application? So that happens through what's called a BOS gateway. So you can actually just follow this tutorial. It's pretty minimal. You can launch your own BOS gateway. It's like the most minimal steps that it would take to get this done. But really, you just need to deploy. You can deploy in Vercel. I'm going to show you today a few different ways that you can do this as well, because there are different, like not all gateways are created equal, and there are different ways to deploy. Obviously, you don't have to deploy with Vercel. You can deploy with Docker. You can deploy a static site. You can deploy a bunch of different ways. So just quickly reading over this, though, it is really just pretty much running a static website. Typically, like a complex JavaScript project these days, using something like Next.js or some sort of other build tool or build command. So you'll see familiar stuff. If you've ever built a front-end web application before, you'll see familiar commands here like npm run build, and you'll see that the output of the build command, all of the website's assets are stored in this distribution directory, this dist folder, and then basically just deploying that. So what is deploying that other than kind of hosting it somewhere? So you can host it on Vercel, you can host it on Cloudflare, you can host it on anything really. So let's take a look at what that looks like from the developer's point of view. So I actually went to the near discovery GitHub, and once again, just gonna zoom in a bit for you guys so everyone can see. It's just near discovery. You can actually start a development version locally, so you don't have to deploy on Vercel. You can actually deploy on your own. So I'm gonna go over to my machine basically, and I'm gonna basically go into a near discovery here, and I'm gonna run. So I've already done PNPI stuff to just checking everything as we sort of go there, and I'm going to do PNPM.dev. PNPM is just kind of like an install tool. Kind of think of it like npm or yarn. So nothing confusing there yet. And I've already cloned the repository. Oh, great! This is awesome. This happens all the time. It's great that it happened. I'm going to just go ahead and I'm just going to do what most people do. I'm just going to delete this. And there's a lock file. I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to start over again. So this is me going back to like square one and installing everything using PNPM. Because obviously when I installed again, something messed up. So this should give me like a fresh install of all the packages. And fingers crossed, hope this one works. Any sort of like caching and weird stuff should be kicked out. Let's see. It looks like it's built something and it's going somewhere. So yeah, so it's loading basically what is near.org. So just to refresh what I did there is I accidentally hit PNPMI again, and I guess that it had some sort of conflict with what I had already installed from a previous date in the Sneer Discovery repo, and it just kind of messed up. So if ever this happens, you have two options. You can just delete the Near Discovery folder completely. So what that would look like is you just go back to this folder and you would like back out of it, and you'd say like, you know, I'm on Ubuntu, or you'd say like remove, and then -RF is sort of like ignore everything, just like hard remove it, and you would just remove the folder and reclone the repository. But the other kind of faster way to do that, or to get really close to deleting the entire thing and to cleaning up all your modules, is to basically delete the node modules and delete any files, like any lock files, and then reinstalling everything. But now that I've stopped the dev server, I'm going to have to start it again. So I'm going to start that up again. I'm going to go back to here. So once again, it's like loading from the start. So this is basically loading what you would normally see on near.org. But I believe it's loading like, I think we're on Mainnet. I'm not sure. I'm just going to kind of scoot around and check it out. I think we're on Testnet, actually. Yeah, these are all Testnet components. And you'll notice if you go to Discover, just so you know which network you're on, if you go to Discover on Mainnet, you'll see that there's like a much higher number of components here. But you can still do everything that you would do on Mainnet, and you can kind of search on Testnet. So what separates Testnet from Mainnet? Basically, it's just a configuration file. So if we look in here, you'll see that there's near discovery. There's this environment example. This is not being loaded because it's a .env example. If we move this to be a .env file, it would probably hot load in these variables, and it would flip it over to mainnet. I'm just going to check in the next config here. This is just stuff for Next.js, so this is kind of like a bit of a red herring. It's not really important as to whether you're on mainnet or not, but I want to show everyone how to flip over to mainnet. So what you would typically do is you do like a copy of .env .example, and you would copy that over to .env. And what that's going to do is it's going to make a copy of that file, but it's actually .env now. So when I run pnpm dev, it it should theoretically. I haven't done it on this repository. I've done it on this BOS Gateway template that I'm going to show you in a moment. So if it doesn't work here, I'll show you it working over there. So let's see if it basically scooped up these variables, and it actually takes what was already in the repository in the code. It's probably saying somewhere, if this is not defined, call it testnet. If this is not defined, call it something else. Or, I mean, it did take me to kind of to near.org before. So let me go to localhost. Let me see if I am on mainnet, and I am. So you can see I'm running on my local host, but instead of components, oh, it reloaded over here too. So sorry, I couldn't show you like the testnet version at the same time because it's hot. This kind of like hot reloaded in my tab. But basically, instead of showing us the testnet components, we're now kind of one-to-one with what's on near.org. So if I search for a component here, like if I search for ZKEVM, which is something I'm going to show you guys in a bit, you can see like the bridge component, and the same search should be working over here as well on the local host. And it should be showing you the same components. So that's just a quick way that I configured my gateway using an environment file. If you dig deeper into this repository, into the source for the repository, you'll see kind of how the gateway comes together and a little bit more about how basically like the layout of the main page is sort of set up. So you'll see like some of the source components and like how this project comes together, and it basically loads the page that you're seeing. So here's pages, and I'm going to actually show you guys a different gateway repository that's very similar to this. It was forked off of this to basically host components other than near.org. So I'm going to flip to that other one now. It's called the BOS Gateway template. So I'm just going to exit out of this. I'm going to show you where that is as well. Let me just go up like that. So there's this near discovery BOS repo. And there's also this BOS Gateway template from the Near DeFi organization. So you can go to github.com/neardefi/BOS-gateway-template. And this is Radu from Proximity. Actually, he has done some work on this. So he basically did a lot of work on the ZK EVM stuff. And what's cool about this template is it's ready to go with you dropping in your own main component. So he explains a little bit about how the entry component works, and it's under source components index. So if we look at the BOS Gateway template, and I'm going to actually get myself in there right now so that I don't get confused here. If we look at source, components, and index, we can see you'll notice that he said that his template is the hello, or it loads the hello world component that he made. I have loaded the ZK EVM landing page just to sort of switch it up. His component, I assure you, only says hello world. So if we go ahead and we put that in there, I mean, that's all we would see. We can run that, and we can see that right now, and then we can hot swap over. And by the way, I have already done the switching over to Mainnet. So basically, I've done the end file here, and I've switched over to Mainnet. So we're going to look at his hello world component right now. I should just use my switcher instead of doing that. Oh, his hello world component only runs on Testnet. So let's delete the end file. Let's close the dev server, and let's restart. So now we are on Testnet, and we are going to look at his hello world component. Whoops, no, don't look at components. We're just going to look at the localhost. Oh, actually, sorry. The slash components page could not be found, and his component is only on Mainnet. So once again, I'm going to go up. I'm going to copy m.example to m, and I'm going to reload the dev server. And now we are on Mainnet again, and we will look at Radu's hello world component. So we're going to get there eventually. That's because I actually missed. I was on near.org, and I was at slash components there. That's why that was saying 404 not found, as you can see here. But we're going to go back to the main localhost. So what makes this BOS Gateway template different than others is that it doesn't load near.org. It loads basically, it just loads a component. So Radu's component basically just says hello world. And if we go and we kind of Control Z here and put back in the ZK EVM landing page from the Polygon ZK EVM network, we're going to actually see that component. So let's take a look, and you can see it reloaded. So basically, this is a component that, like, this is an entire component, like this page. So it's just one page, one component. So if you want to make a BOS component and you want to launch it on like one page, you want to keep it clean, you can use this BOS Gateway template to launch just with that component as a landing page. So I've connected my MetaMask now. And now I can connect to like all of these different components. I can talk to these. I don't know why these dexes aren't showing up. Oh, I can like talk to these different like dexes. They'll load, and I can like swap tokens. And if I click back, this is a bridging component. I can bridge from Polygon ZK EVM to ETH Mainnet, or I can bridge from ETH Mainnet back to Polygon ZK EVM. All of the code, like the glue code to like prompt me and my MetaMask to like switch networks and do all that stuff, that's all brought in from the BOS Gateway side. So once again, like, let's take a look at this and let's think about like, what is the distinction between a component like this landing page component or a subcomponent of it, like this bridge component, and the gateway itself. So the gateway is what keeps all of the code like for example, this really nice wallet connector powered by Block Native, that is code, JavaScript code, that is automatically loaded in from the gateway. So if you were to clone this BOS, if you were to fork this BOS gateway template, you would basically have a repository like this, and you could, it's up to you if you want to load various libraries, like if you want to load Block Native as your wallet selector. We've had some people basically comment and say, hey, I don't want to use a near wallet selector for publishing components and Block Native for connecting MetaMask. I actually want to use a universal wallet selector. And that would be something, a change that you would make at the gateway level. Whether other, gateways support that, or whether you can get them to, to accept your changes and your kind of universal wallet selector into their gateway code, that's kind of dependent on you. So if that's something of interest, like making gateway code and changing how these sorry, just want to get back to here. Changing how these wallet selectors look and like what's visible on the gateway page. Like sometimes gateways, for example, a gateway that we're deprecating soon, sometimes gateways come with like headers. They come with a lot of extra stuff like here.org. So they'll come with like a /edit, this just links out to documentation. This header right here is part of the gateway. It's not part of the components. Everything underneath the header, this landing page, is actually a component. So this is another landing page component. So this is a full screen BOS component that's loaded. Just exactly like this is a full screen BOS component loaded underneath some gateway code, which includes the Block Native wallet selector. So if you're looking to make like library level changes or gateway level changes, this is how you would do it. I'm going to connect this back to one other piece of the docs that I found interesting and helpful, is if you are on the BOS Gateway docs, if you go back a step to using iframes, this is actually super important for a lot of people who want to bring in external scripts. So we have a lot of people building BOS components who ask us the question, how can I bring in a third-party JavaScript library into my BOS component? Let's actually first just take a look at what a BOS component looks like right now. So let's just look at here.org, and let's look at the ZK EVM LP, which is the landing page made by me. So we can look at the source code here. Let's zoom in a little bit. We can look at the source code here. And we can see that there's a bunch of styling, and then there's a bunch of stuff figuring out whether the Ethereum state is set, whether you're on the bridge component or not, whether the network is set correctly, and then we're finally into like the main sort of look and feel of this landing page app. So you can see gamma, liquidity, and it's just basically a React component. So there's not a lot of code here, and there's not a lot of there's nowhere to put in a custom JavaScript library. There's nowhere to import. Like you can't write an import statement in a BOS component. You can't control what comes in like the head tag and add extra scripts or extra styles. You're basically just writing the code inside of a React component. So a lot of people, this is like probably one of the most asked questions when writing a BOS component. How do I bring in a third-party library? And I found it in the documentation that probably there are two ways to do it, and it relates to this talk like a great deal. One of the ways to bring in a third-party library is to, once again, fork a BOS gateway template like this one, or oops, I had that pinned already. You can fork a BOS gateway template like this one, or the one from Near Discovery, and you can actually add in your own third-party libraries. So you can add support. That's how Block Native got this in here, right? Like obviously this third-party JavaScript comes in from somewhere. So you can do that, and then you can make that available through the VM, and that requires like a lot of coding, a lot of work with the VM to like kind of make that available, right? So that's obviously like kind of, it's a bit of extra work. Or what I thought was like really interesting is you can bring in third-party JavaScript libraries. Let's say you're just like wanting to render crypto voxels or whatever. You just want to like have an iframe that shows a particular length in like crypto voxels. You can actually bring in crypto voxels through an iframe. So what you need to do there is you basically just need to follow this tutorial, make sure that you kind of check all the boxes. I can see right off the top, like allow scripts, things like that. Like, you're gonna need to kind of play a little nice with BOS and like follow this example, but you can bring in some pretty awesome stuff because you can bring it in through an iframe safely. So why is the VM so restrictive? And why are BOS components so light? And why are they so tiny? Kind of, they're usually very small and simple. I can search for another. I said actually to search for ZK EVM. A couple other ones here. I'll just search for some BOS components. I'll just open up any one of them. So why are BOS components? Oops, I wanted to view the source. Sorry, view details, source. Okay, so why are they so light? Why are they so small? Why are they only the React code? So I think the reasoning behind that is pretty simple. We're storing this on chain, so we're putting this on the near blockchain. And why is the gateway code? Like, gateway code is pretty big, and certain gateways pull in all sorts of different libraries to support Ethereum chains, EVM chains, and to support Near, and to support all this other stuff. So why is that code so big? Well, it's pretty simple. The gateway is deployed statically, and it's hosted somewhere. So it's hosted somewhere on the internet. And you can actually host it even through IPFS and stuff, so you can make it fully decentralized. And the components themselves are stored on chain, so they have to be kind of like lightweight. There is another reason, though, that often kind of doesn't come up, but is really important to certain users, and that is that BOS components are basically stored on chain, which means that they're signed by the author. So we can see in the about section here, like, I mean, it's the ref finance admin likely published this component because it comes from their account, right? So this is a component that basically comes from them. So this is their ZK EVM swap component that they've made. You can see the history. You can see all of the code changes from the first day that they forked it, and they probably forked it from Vadim on the Proximity team. And you can, basically all of this is transparent. So all of this has been signed, it's on chain, and it's very much like kind of like a mini GitHub in this respect, but it's 100% secure because all of the updates to these components are signed. And that means that when users go and they open these components and they say, okay, I want to connect my wallet and I want to do a swap here on this network, when this pops up, that means that I can trust this component as a user. So that's another reason why components are small and tiny and very minimal, and it's only the logic that needs to actually be unique to render the component and to basically have these kind of inputs and to make an on-chain transaction, like to say, hey, I want to approve USDC spending for this widget. Only this code and only the code that would prompt MetaMask or would prompt the Near wallet to do something, that's stored in a BOS component, and the rest of it is in the gateways. So the gateways are pretty big, they're pretty heavy, and then again, if you're making games, if you're doing other stuff, you're gonna want to use an iframe to bring in third-party libraries. Like if you want to use like 3JS, if you want to use like Anim.js or whatever to do animations and extra stuff. If you're want to bring in a lot of third-party JavaScript, you're going to want to consider doing a lot of your rendering inside the iframe and sort of like separating your game from the BOS component that would be like around the iframe, making the on-chain transactions. So I hope that kind of demystifies some of the differences between what's happening in a BOS gateway, what's happening inside the BOS VM, and then how these components are being rendered, and sort of like gives people a better overview of the glue that sort of brings BOS together, and allows you to kind of visit a website like near.org and see all this stuff kind of hot loading. These are all components, by the way, near Horizon and whatnot. So yeah, just wanted to have this my overview, and yeah, and let you guys basically ask some questions from here. So I'm going to go ahead and I have to unmute this tab just so I wasn't getting distracted there with the extra noise. And yeah, go ahead and shoot with any questions. I'll keep that.
Can you share more insight on like how to actually like pass information between the iframe and maybe yeah, kind of how that works?
That's a great question. Yeah, so it's a very complicated question, and it would take like a long time to kind of show you how to do message passing. But what I can tell you is that this is pretty standard. So this happens a lot with iframes that are embedded on pages, especially with like third-party iframes. You often control them by sending a message and by receiving a message inside the iframe code. I'm going to probably point you in the direction of the Mozilla developer docs and just the post message method. So a lot of what they're saying right here on message and on message. So on message is receiving the window message event. And that would come from a post message that happens inside the BOS component. So the BOS component would say to the iframe post message, and then basically the iframe would receive an on message event. And you can pass anything you want. So typically you pass like stringified JSON, and it's something like, like command, do this thing. And then inside the iframe code, you're going to look at that command and you're going to say, oh, they want me to start the game. Or they paid for a player profile, and the player profile account ID is this. So you would be passing in data, and then you'd be receiving data in the on message method of your iframe. So try to think of iframes and iframe code and sort of messaging back and forth between a BOS component, like just basically creating your own kind of like dialogue between the two, and then basically just like having like the most minimal amount of talking that you would need to between the two. So one would be like the iframe would pop up, it would render the game, it would say, hey, click here to create a player profile. And so you'd click on that, and you can actually post the message out of the iframe, and you can catch it in the BOS component. So it goes bi-directional as well. So yeah, just remember sort of like the fundamentals of communicating with an iframe using the post message, and then read over the docs and make sure that you can kind of like sort of reason between the two, because that's going to be really important to understanding how to like make this work. I hope that answers your question. It's really hard to like spin up an iframe example. Like,
Elliot has a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question about the BOS Gateway template that you were showing. Do you have that open again in VS Code, or do you have it running in any tab?
Yep.
So where do you... I saw the VM initializer happens on the first page, but you need a login button somewhere, right?
A login for which?
In order to, I'm looking at this template, and I don't know if I see, like, so it takes away the header from like near social or near.org, the other gateways or something like that. But that also means that it takes away the login button.
Correct. So this is actually a BOS gateway template for EVM chains, basically, for EVM.
Oh.
So we've stripped out all of the near stuff. So it's not for developing near components. It's not for publishing stuff. It's literally just for signing into EVM chains. Yeah. So you can actually switch the network, and you can look at BOS components from other networks as well. So let me actually go to .org. Built a Galaxy component that we built. I mean, it's under the thing, but I'm just gonna go here. I'm gonna copy that. I'm gonna paste that in as the root. I don't really know what's gonna happen, but we'll figure it out. And it says please switch to BNB chain. Pretty ugly. The stock styling that we were using on the Galaxy gateway, obviously not here. Oops, I don't want to do that. I just want to go here. So, it says switch to BNB chain. So actually I could do that. It's not even in the Selector here, but I can switch manually. Oh, and I'm getting, oh, no, okay, it went away. So basically, this is now, Block Native figured it out too. Kind of cool, even though it wasn't in the selector. So the gateway code that I just showed you, it only showed me 4 networks at the beginning. I switched on my MetaMask, which forced Block Native to show me Binance. So it's just something that you can configure in the gateway as well. So if you go to the gateway code, you can jump into, I don't know offhand where it is, but I mean, if you just search networks, you can find, so that's all the near networks. You can find a way to configure what is shown in Block Native. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head like where it is, but you can configure it, and you can configure what's shown in this drop-down list for EVM networks. Now, you raise an interesting point, like the login button for near.org, like it's gone. This sign out, sign in is gone. You can bring that back in. You can also just clone the near discovery one, and you can start from there, because the near discovery one can also it can also open these widgets as well. So I'm looking at it right now, but I don't leave it. I'm gonna go to just my widgets. I forget how to do that. Profile components. So I'm gonna go here, and yeah, the Deer.org stuff, it doesn't show you the Block Native selector. So it just has this really ugly, weird thing here. Oops, if I switch back to ZK EVM, I get this, it's basically rendered again. So it's up to you, like what you want to show in your gateway, like where you want these buttons to live. Like if you wanted to sort of live up here, I know you can pin block native like over on the left or whatever you want to do. But yeah, it's up to you. And again, like this, I just wanted to show this BOS Gateway component because it was clean and it's essentially for showing landing pages, basically, that are BOS components.
Super cool. Okay, I get you now. Very cool. Thank you for sharing.
It's a great question because it shows people what's from the component, which is everything underneath this block native piece, and what comes with the gateway, what doesn't come with the gateway. So it's a good question.
How do you think about the trade-off between those two ways of supporting third-party libraries in the gateway and the iframe?
That's also a really good question. I know if you work on supporting it through the iframe, and then you deal with essentially what we would kind of think of as the stock gateway. If you focus on bringing in third-party libraries inside of the iframe, that means that your component can actually be viewed by all gateways, right? So you don't have to go around to all the gateway providers and say, hey, do you want to add my third-party JavaScript library that allows you to do 3D JavaScript or something so that people can look at my game component. So the reason I keep games as an example is because they always need third-party JavaScript libraries. So they usually need like 3JS or something like that. And it's a great candidate for explaining that you're probably not going to get all the gateways, like even near.org, to support that. So your best bet is to essentially build your game inside the iframe and then wrap it with the BOS component that does all of the, like the blockchain work. So finding out what NFTs the user has, and then the iframe would do the job of rendering the NFT gallery. So you can kind of keep your world separate. You can work on the iframe with a bunch of sample code from a user. So like assume this user's already logged in, whatever, they have this NFTs, focus on your product. And then when it comes time to hot loading a user account and pulling a list of their NFTs and then sending that to the iframe, you just have to deal with that message passing interface that we showed here. So message and on message, right? So that's that's one way to think about it. The other trade-off was if you wanted to do more deeper work on wallet selection. So you wanted to make the wallet experience better, the loading of accounts better, to have a universal wallet selector where people could select, from Near or Ethereum from a single button instead of having like sign in with Near and then having this block native thing floating over on the other side, which is something that we've kind of we've wrestled with from a UX point of view as before. Like we've had these conversations. And then what happens when you add another chain? What happens when you add, like a Solana or something, and you have to log in with your Phantom wallet? It's just a mess, right? So if you want a universal wallet selector, you're probably going to have to do that at the gateway level.
Cool. Thank you.
what do you see like gateway teams specializing in? I know like Pagoda's heavily involved in like near.org. They're doing things like search. Like how do you see like people like maintaining gateways and kind of building custom use cases and like how that will evolve?
That's a good question. I see Gateway probably going more modular. So I think that more and more we're probably going to see gateways kind of like they're either going to go one of two ways. They're going to specialize on particular chains, like this gateway one that I showed you here. I mean, you can go to a different network, or you can show a different full screen page component. Or gateway cells will become a little bit more modular, and you'll be able to kind of pull from a bunch of different like gateway libraries and compose, the gateway of your choice. I think gateway teams are probably going to focus on the first one in the immediate future. So standing up and basically supporting gateways for for specific chains or specific use cases. I could see even like Near Horizon has their own gateway because they want Near Horizon to be like the BOS app to be hosted on nearhorizon.com or whatever. So I see like more specific gateways, full screen component gateways, more specificity happening. And then I see like more kind of gateway modules evolving out of that, like gateway libraries. You can add this to your gateway, you can add that to your gateway, you could swap out the near wallet selector and the block native wallet selector for this universal one. I see more of that happening. And then there's a whole other layer to it that's outside of this conversation. Because it's like pretty nerdy and crazy. But there's like caching layers and talking to IPFS and connecting to other services, which are not necessarily like talking to chains through components, but it's sort of auxiliary services to the gateway. So a caching layer, for example, would basically be a layer of all of the code for components that wasn't pulling directly from near.org, but every time you hit it, it would pull from a cache, basically. So like hot load, so just improving the experience. Because right now, when I land, I mean, this is pretty snappy. And the reason why it's so snappy is because I'm pretty certain, I know for a fact that they're running an indexer and like a caching layer on the back end. So near.org, even though I go to discover and I go to components and I click on a component, oops, sorry, I wanted to show you details. And I see the source, I can see the history, I can view the commits and stuff. A lot of this is loading really fast and being shown to me really fast because it's coming through a caching layer. Now I can still go to the chain and I can still verify that this commit is from this person. So NDC plug. And I could still, I can still verify all of this on chain without going through that caching layer, but I'm certain it's coming through a caching layer. So what is actually landing in my browser is different than what's on chain, but I can always go verify it because all the information to verify it is here for me. So yeah, so more extra nerdy, like caching layers and fetching components faster, rendering components faster. I think a lot of work on the VM. If you look at the IFrame component, it was kind of even a little bit surprising to me kind of cool. I was like, oh, cool, iframes. I want iframes. And designing your own components and building custom components for the VM. I could see the VM evolving quite a bit to make gateways more modular. I hope that answers your question. It's like a really long answer.
Yeah, that's very insightful. Another question that people ask me is like, usually like people pay for like a RPC provider and like things like that. Like what is like who when you fork the near discovery gateway, like it just automatically runs, and like how does that work? Like who pays for that, and like how can you configure your own?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a question for the near.org team. Like people behind here is who's going to pay for the near indexes going forward. You can most likely configure it through environment variables, and then you can actually tell your gateway to talk to different network RPCs through config here. So yeah, you can configure different RPCs that you would use, and then it will use those RPCs to pull in the components, basically. So in the future, that's a great question. Like you may have to pay for an RPC access to near. Depends on the network usage, depends on how busy these RPC endpoints are getting and how long the near foundation is going to continue funding them. But yeah, there are already third-party RPC providers. There's like 6, 7, or 8 different ones, professional RPC providers. So you could swap them out, and you could see how the performance is on your when you deploy.
Any other questions?
Yeah, you briefly mentioned like adding other chains like Solana and things like that, and like I know you guys were like instrumental in like pushing adding like the EVMs and ethers.js support. So like how can developers push for like changes and like additional chain support, or even maybe additional like libraries into the overall like VMs that most gateways support?
Yeah, great question. I know from the Proximity team's kind of perspective, I can speak from that perspective. Like we're looking at the chains with the most activity, the most liquidity. So if there's teams out there that want to develop into those chains, we're always looking for people who want to develop components, and some of these components were developed by external developers. In terms of the gateways themselves, we are looking for strong teams around the world, who want to host EVM gateways and multi-chain gateways for DeFi. And that's basically for teams that kind of want to be the Web3 landing page for DeFi. So if that's kind of interesting to you, you should definitely go to Proximity.dev and fill out our form and basically chat with one of our analysts, and basically he'll run you through like what that looks like and what sort of support is available there. We are looking at it. So that's all I can really say is we're looking at other chains, and we're trying to bring BOS everywhere basically. And then from the near side, in terms of going multi-chain, I know that there has been like a bit of innovation there in terms of like some projects that are doing things like showing NFTs cross-chain through BOS components because of the EVM support. That's pretty cool. That's awesome to see, because that's something that kind of originally was included in the gateways just for DeFi, but now you can see, for example, your Ethereum or your Ethereum NFTs on near.org, if you sign in with MetaMask. So probably .org is looking for a lot more like multi-chain involvement there. And I know that for NearCon this year, we're trying to kind of have a bit more of a display of a multi-chain kind of like showcase for BOS components. And basically, I think that feeds into like development work on BOS gateways and BOS gateways for specific chains, like I was talking about earlier.
Okay, I was more asking like, so, okay, say I wanted to add like Solana support. You guys added like the ethers.js support for like Denver. Like, what is there's like the viewer repo, and then there's like this VM repo, and like, so like how are gateways linked to the VM, and how do we what is the process for making changes to the VM and then having other gateways update to these changes?
So are you looking for more like a standards process?
Or just like the process and how the VM relates, or like what is even the process for it, like adding a chain, and given the perspective that you guys did this for like Ethereum.
Great, yeah, okay, I understand a little bit better now. So the process for adding a chain is basically, so the gateway and the VM are, you could kind of think of them as the same. Basically, the gateway is the VM, and it runs a lot of this code. So it basically loads in Ethers.js, and it loads in support for this chain or that chain. And then what gets rendered on screen, like in this BOS gateway template, this BOS, this block native component, is whatever you want. So if you were to take a step back and you were to build a Solana app today, and you were to add a Solana wallet selector, where you could select from Phantom or a different Solana wallet, you would basically, go to like create React app. You'd import probably some Solana wallet selector, and you would add it to your project. So that's really all it takes to get a component like this on the screen. And then in terms of the VM and surfacing the Ethers.js like library and making it available on the window, you would just have to basically expose what you need to kind of like the global window. So then when BOS components are loaded, they can pull off of that, and they can basically make a statement like Ethers.js. So hold on one sec, I'll show you. So if you expose Ethers like globally in your gateway VM code, like in your gateway, oops, sorry. I'm going to go to my components. If you look and you see me making a call to like ethers.provider. So how is Ethers there for this component, right? And how is Ethers available? If you were running a gateway that was not supporting the EVM, this component just wouldn't render. It just would say Ethers, is undefined. So the only reason why this is available is that basically Ethers was loaded by the VM, and then it was made globally available to the BOS components through the VM by basically just making it globally available on the window. So that's kind of how you make like custom third-party libraries and custom chains, and that's how you would make custom providers available. That's how you would kind of like patch it in. I kind of like would recommend, if you want to go ahead and do this and you were really serious about the project, and you wanted like to support a major chain, for example, and you weren't just kind of doing it as sort of like an experiment, I would recommend like, reaching out, having a discussion, maybe jump into like the BOS Builder Telegram and say, I want to be the one to, branch off of the BOS viewer and add support for Solana, for example, and be like, who's going to support this? And then you try to bring it back into the main BOS viewer, because as we saw with this gateway example here, there's no near login. There's no way to edit BOS components. There's no way to do anything. So this gateway is very different from near.org, where you can sign in with your near wallet. Like very different. And no header and no extra stuff, right? Same component, just different gateway, right? So if you're serious about third-party libraries and supporting like chains, especially because there will be future interest in that, you probably want to like plug into the community and chat with people on how to do it the best way. And don't just take my like random example of like import it, make it globally available, because that's probably not the best explanation, and it's probably not the best, safest way to do it. I know that with Ethos.js, there was a little bit of there's some stuff with like async and promises, and there's a lot of VM kind of like nitty gritty that needs to be kind of thought through before adding third-party libraries. So just be wary, like it's not as simple as I sort of like made it sound. There's a bit more considerations because of the way that the VM pulls code from near and executes it. So remember, the VM's inside the gateway. You can customize the gateway to do whatever you want. Whatever libraries you import into your gateway, you can make them available inside the VM. You can go to, just go back a couple clicks here. You can go back to designing components, and you can figure out how to bring in custom components and custom libraries. But I would just warn you that there's like quirks about how the VM like runs that code that you bring in. So you're probably going to want to like get in a bit deeper with the BOS gateway like chat, or the BOS builder chats on Telegram.
So you can't just like make a PR to like the VM repo on your social? Like, is it like?
You can. You just probably want to ask for the best way to do it, and you can make a PR for sure. But you probably just want to get support. I'm just sort of kind of painting a holistic path there. So you don't just like make a PR and nobody looks at it and they sort of say, oh, like, I'm not going to take this seriously because there might be something like unsafe about how it's been included, or there might be something about the VM that is a little quirky, like works in certain scenarios, but it doesn't work in all scenarios. So I'm just kind of cautioning that the VM itself, like the components inside, and adding something extra and adding another chain especially is probably prone to like requiring a lot of like testing. and just community kind of involvement.
And then just one more question. People have been kind of confused what a VM means, and I've seen like different like wording, like web engine and things like that. Like, can you kind of explain like what a VM is compared to like how we're using the word VM, or if it's like actually a VM, and like what the survival on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So web engine is kind of like a new, that's kind of like a new term for me. It's kind of cool. It is kind of like a, I guess, a web engine, but the thing that I think makes it more of a VM, like a virtual machine, is that it's basically running like higher level code. So it's not just running JavaScript code, it's running React code. And if we look at, I keep going back to the same components. I just have to go back here. View details. If we look at this one and we look at where it's showing widgets, so widget. This is like a React app, so it's like where I'm like loading multiple React components. So I'm pulling in source from a bunch of different people here. So a bunch of different publishers, and it's kind of like a virtual machine in the sense that it parses that code. It parses all of the sort of like preamble code here. It has functions. If you've ever like written a Solidity smart contract and then you turn it into bytecode, you deployed it, it's running on the Ethereum network, and it's basically executing inside the Ethereum virtual machine. So these components are published on the air. They're obviously they're kind of like crunched a little bit, and they're stored small and kind of tight. But they are ultimately pulled out and run by the gateway code, which has the VM embedded inside it, which is sort of the BOS VM. So they're executed, right? And it comes through, it sort of scans all this code, it sees if there's any embedded widgets, and then it basically decides, okay, I got to go grab those widgets, and I got to go their code, and I got to actually run through any sort of preamble kind of like JavaScript before rendering their components. So it goes like render all the way down. And so it is kind of like a virtual machine in the sense that it's running and executing code, like it's executing actual logic. And when you go on a swap component or a bridge component, for example, and it tells your MetaMask to pop up, like it's actually telling your browser to like do things. So yeah, I'd say it's more like a virtual machine. It's a React virtual machine, basically. Like you could say it's like a web engine, but I think calling it kind of like a React virtual machine is probably like the best, most accurate explanation.
And then going off of that, like why can't there just be React? Like what are, like right now this is like there's not all functionalities of React. Can you kind of speak to like why these limitations are present and like what those limitations are for like developers coming from like traditional React development?
Yeah, that's a great question. So why not just have people publishing full React components and allow these components to just pull in third-party libraries and import statements and do whatever they want. So part of it is parsing that and figuring out like how to turn those import statements into live calls through the gateway to like NPM, for example, and like hot load those libraries and bring them in. And you would have to bring in those libraries through some sort of extra gateway component, because you would basically, up at the top, you'd have like, import 3JS. So where do you get 3JS, right? And how does the gateway that you're currently on, which is just a static website, how does that go and like fetch 3JS and pull it in? It can do that a billion different ways. So part of it is just parsing it and then figuring out like where to get third-party stuff and how to make it just behave properly. And then if you were to write all of your import statements for other widgets up at the top, like you were to say like, hey, I want you to import this bridge widget, where are those, right? So where are those hosted? And you kind of have to like learn a little bit about importing relatively from wherever you were on BOS. So that's like kind of part of it. And a lot of it has to do with like just security and basically making sure that when you're inside a BOS component, that you're only seeing BOS component code, and nothing's like kind of like jumping in front of your window, or like if I pop up MetaMask, nothing's gonna like change the contract address. So there's no JavaScript that's like getting in, that's gonna like do any like weird like third-party stuff and like kind of like hack what's going on here. So once again, you can go to About, you can see that I've published this component. Do you trust me? Do you trust all of the sub components and authors here? So a lot of it, and a lot of like running your own kind of virtual machine instead of just letting people like host anything and like host full-blown websites, has to do with basically like security. And I think composability is also a big one. So once a BOS component is written once, you can import it into several different components. Like we've already seen a few examples of like these bridge components and these swap components. They're actually pulled into like a number of different landing pages and a number of different ZK EVM projects already. So it's kind of cool to see this sort of swap ZK EVM with its props, quick swap, and then you can switch props. So the DEX is pancake swap, and you can force the network. Like you can import this widget multiple times in a single component, or you can see it imported in a bunch of people's components. It creates a more collaborative environment. And that way we don't have to store the same code on chain like 50 million times. Yeah, I mean, like more work on the VM is probably going to be done, and more sort of like parity with React and with the developer kind of style and environment is probably going to get done in the future. I'd say it's like pretty early days, but I don't think it'll ever look and feel exactly like React development.
Can you like briefly outline like where there isn't like feature parity, like because people have been asking about like hooks and global state management. Do you kind of have like off the top of your head like what can't you do in React that you other than external like dependencies like what can't you do in the VM that you can do in React that you would normally have in your toolbelt?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say, yeah, like a lot of the life cycle stuff of React, you can't really like you can't really do. You can pretty much just do like functional components. You can like you're not gonna be able to do like hooks like for like on mount and on unmount and things like that. You're basically you basically are running this code when you your component. And just keep in mind, like you're always running the component code when the component renders. So it's like it just runs through here, and it basically just runs. Yeah. Um, so it's kind of weird. Like normally you would see all of this, and then this sort of like even conditional returns of JSX. You would see all of this running inside of like a function definition. So you would see all of this running inside of like let me just take it and put it inside of something just for fun. You'd see all of this running inside of like like function my component, right? And then you'd have like props. Or wait, sorry. And then all of this stuff would be running inside of it. And then this is where you would have your hooks and stuff. So this is where you would handle stuff like you'd have like your hook for like use state and all this other stuff. And here's when you'd have an import of third-party libraries, right? So you'd have like const, some state, set state. Okay, so that's like local state, right? And props are coming in from the parent. So now let's go back and let's take a look at, I know that this one, I don't know if it's the right one, but imagine that you just didn't have that function stuff up at the top and it automatically just came with a variable called props. Okay, so there's your variable props, right? And I mentioned you don't need the sort of the lifecycle hooks like on mount because your component just mounts, right? So this code runs with your component mounts. There's state.init and state.update that are part of the VM, and that helps you manage your local state. So that is equivalent to this local state. So it's sort of state, set state, but instead you're just kind of you're using these sort of pre-built methods that are part of the VM. Let me just go to, I just know how to get to it through here. So you can go through the API reference, and you can check out, I found this really helpful, like back in the day, checking out the state APIs. So init, update, and then the storage ones are cool. So you need to use local storage. So you can use local storage across all components, or you can set private storage that is only visible by your component, right? So there's a lot of stuff in the, I'm pretty sure it's in this documentation as well. Pretty sure they have like a bunch of the built-in components, BOS API. Here it is: cache, fetch, primitive, state, and storage. So a lot of this stuff, it's never going to be like one-to-one with React, but it's going to be close. It's going to be basically like there's an equivalent, and there's an equivalent way to get what you want done. So there's no local storage, in BOS components, but there's global storage across BOS components. And if your component calls storage.set, it will change local storage and it will be visible by all components. If it calls private set and private get, it will change local storage only for that component. So there's like an equivalent there, and in some cases, it's even more helpful. Like it's more helpful than the normal local storage APIs. Does that kind of help with a bit of that distinction between like React and VM?
No, yeah, that was beautiful. That's been a lot of people have been asking that. A lot of these questions you've been answering, so it's good to have it in one video. It's lit.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Thank you so much, Matt. And I just want to ask if there's anything else you'd like to share with everyone before we close.
I'll stop sharing my screen. I'll jump back to your window so people can say hi. There's not much else I'd like to share. Just wanted to say, like, we're pretty fired up about BOS on the proximity side, Proximity.dev. If you're a team serious about multi-chain DeFi, if you want to be like the Web3 landing page, or you want to just be like a chain-specific DeFi gateway, give us a shout. And if you want to work on just BOS components for DeFi, let us know. We just like to be aware of all the BOS DeFi builders that are out there, looking for like quality teams building great DeFi components that sort of rival their centralized counterparts. So we're looking to basically put Web3 DeFi on chain through BOS. And then also, as you guys know, can't leave without plugging my other project, KeepOn, which is an onboarding protocol. Basically just, click into Web3. It's dropping assets and receiving assets and getting access to on-chain transactions just with a single link. Thanks for sharing the website there. So it's keepon.xyz, and for all the developers out there, it's obviously just docs.keepon.xyz. We have crazy good docs and really fun team. We also have a Telegram builder group too. You can reach out and find out where that is. Yeah, we're having a lot of fun, basically with a lot of cool stuff that we're building on Near. Some of it's BOS related and some of it's not BOS related. It's just like a hell of a lot of fun when you're on like the end user, like the onboarding kind of side of things. It's like super fun because people always want to like do interesting things. They always want to like drop assets and like onboard their friends and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
I got one more question. Sorry to ask so many questions though. There's like based on like just like what you said earlier. You're mentioning like hosting the whole app on like IPFS, or like what do you use for that? Is it like a Swarm? Is that like a Fleek? Like what's like is that a Web4? Like how you do that?
That's a really good question. So you can host entire web pages on like on chain and stuff, and you can host like even parts of BOS components, like all of your CSS on IPFS, for example, and you can fetch it in using the fetch API that's in the VM. In terms of talking about like rolling up a whole web page and storing it on IPFS, it's a little bit kind of complicated. But I mean, a lot of people do it with services like, they do it with like Pinata, and they do it with these other services. One thing to note about that, rolling up like a whole website, like Uniswap, for example, and like taking a build of the Uniswap front end and hosting it on IPFS, it still requires you to work with like a centralized pinning provider. So it's not like a fully decentralized solution. And again, like you're taking like the whole Uniswap project and you're pushing it up somewhere. It's decentralized, right? And that's going to be kind of like costly and expensive. So that's where like the difference between BOS kind of comes in, and like having these like itty bitty little components and then building like the ZK EVM landing page out of everyone else's components, being able to leverage the work of others and like being able to bring in multi-chain components and stuff. Even just hosting multiple chains components on a single website, like on a single gateway. That's, you know, that's kind of like a different approach. I think also like if you want to host your gateway on IPFS, like if you want to build that statically and push that up, that's another way to kind of, you know, kill two birds. Like you want to host the whole gateway on IPFS, you can definitely push it up to IPFS and pin it and do all of that stuff. I hope that answered your question. I do have to run, but it was a great session, and I do have to just like blanket compliment everyone for their questions and clarity. It's super fun, and it's great to see like where the community is like asking questions and like how they're understanding BOS, and it helps me kind of like better understand it as just one of the many people that are sort of like building out this ecosystem.
Thanks, Matt.